Bueno, vamos a empezar. Bienvenidos todos a otro meetup de la comunidad Bitcoin de Barcelona. Hoy tenemos la gran suerte de tener a Mir aquí con nosotros. Ya estuvo en 2014 en Barcelona, una buena temporada. Y parece, ahora nos va a explicar, que se vuelve a instalar un poco en Barcelona. Entonces, para presentar un poco el espacio, Tomás nos va a dirigir unas palabras, que es un poco el representante del Fab Lab, que nos explicará un poquito qué se hace por aquí, y después Mike, que es un viejo conocido de la casa, nos explicará un poco, nos hará un poquito de trayectoria de quién es Amir y qué representa Amir para la comunidad Bitcoin. ¿Vale? ¿Tomás?
¿En inglés o en castellano? So this is welcome to Fab Lab Barcelona at IAC. It's not a coincidence that we are hosting a few events with the Bitcoin community, now the Blockchain Association of Catalonia also. But, we have been working on setting up projects and putting in practice the connection between distributed manufacturing, open source hardware development, and the transformation of the productive model in cities. There are a lot of things coming on in the future in this house in that regards. And I just want to say that we are thrilled to have Amir here and all of you sharing some thoughts and also sharing, I would say, a different vision of how things work, and not only having visions but making them happen. So now I think that someone needs to make an introduction about you. Who's you? Okay, so welcome. You are at your house. Toilets is over there.
Yeah, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening. Although I'm sure most of you are already familiar with him, especially in this ecosystem. Amir has had numerous contributions in the Bitcoin code and clients. He launched Dark Wallet. He also created Dark Market, which is the precursor to OpenBazaar, the decentralized Bitcoin exchange, the centralized marketplace, excuse me. So, but I promised him I'm not going to over-introduce him. So I'll just direct you to his Wikipedia page or the latest article about him on Wired magazine. So just join me in welcoming our leading activist, revolutionary and hacker, Amir Taaki.
Thank you everybody for inviting me and giving me the honour to speak here. This is my associate, compañero Apollo, and he's a PhD in ecological science and very good with hardware, and also a developer. And he also will be handing out these leaflets now, if anybody didn't receive them.
Hello, I'm just arrived here in Barcelona. My work is with free softwares and ecology, and I met Amir and this group and this movement, and yeah, I'm here together with this.
All right, thank you. So, I'm a person who very much believes that ideas play an important role in society and in shaping human behavior. And one of the things that I want to propose here is the idea of Bitcoin as a global currency through supporting national movements. And when we talk about national movements, movements for nationhood, we're not talking about a state with a centralized apparatus, we are talking about a civil society. And for us to understand this perspective, it's very important to understand that there was an idea born out of the Cold War, which was an idea of the human being as a simplified, rational agent, self-interested and self-motivated, and that this idea of the world became a driving force behind movements on the left, movements on the right, and of the early technological utopianists. And it was the idea of constructing a perfect society based off of mechanical principles through which we could manage society to keep everybody happy. And this overly simplified view of the world offered us comfort and reassurance, and we all went along with it because the stability it offered to us was comforting. But that has allowed to happen is that dark forces are growing up all around the world right now, and these dark forces are threatening to penetrate back into our reality. Unless we can truly understand what are the transformations that are happening globally and try to think how do we apply technology, then if we don't do that, we're just going to become separated into a bubble and our movement become irrelevant. However, if we do think about the social transformations happening globally and apply our knowledge, then this is also an opportunity to make big change. And at the heart of this story is a conflict between two men in the 60s called Lewis Mumford and B.F. Skinner. And there was a guy called B.F. Skinner, and he was a behavioral psychologist. And what he proposed was using scientific techniques to construct a new form of utopia where every human being would be free to be themselves without any form of power or ideology or politics, that simply there would be a mechanical system that would manage human beings. And there's Lewis Mumford, he was a visionary who he proposed new ways of using technology to create a freer type of human being. And there's a documentary in the 60s called Towards Tomorrow, made by the BBC. And in that documentary, it offered different visions of how a future society could look like. And one of the visions was the vision of B.F. Skinner. And B.F. Skinner said that old forms of power and coercion in this age of mass democracy and individualism were no longer possible to be able to manage human beings. And what he proposed was a new system based off of reward. And he did two experiments to demonstrate this concept. The first was that in a cage he had a pigeon, and every time a pigeon pecked the correct button, it would be dropped a pellet of food. And so in this way, the pigeon would be trained as a mechanical object to peck the correct button through reward rather than through punishment. And then he took this concept a step further. In a mental hospital in San Bernardino, California, mental patients, they were given, every time they did a good behavior, they were given a little strip of paper money, like a Monopoly money. And with this money, at lunchtime, at dinner time, they could sit at a nice table, they could eat with nice cutlery. If they didn't have the money, then they didn't get to sit at the nice table. What they created in that mental hospital was a form of social control using reward. And what is very spooky about this experiment, very interesting, is that it's something very close to what we have today, in which people work their entire lives to earn fiat currency, which is printed by a central bank, in a system designed to keep everybody happy, to keep the capital flowing, and to make a small elite group of guys very rich. Lewis Mumford, in the same documentary, Lewis Mumford, he comes along and he actually first criticizes Skinner's utopia, and then he proposes something very different about how we can use technology to construct a free society. So I'm going to show you that video rather than describe it to you.
Skinner has a very ingenious way of making a system of highly compulsive organizations seem as though it were a very humane one. This is his great and original contribution. The old-fashioned mechanical collectives, the mega machines, as I call them, were brutal. They used punishment as a way of enforcing conformity. Skinner and the psychological school that he represents have found a much better system than punishment. They first tried it out on animals, and now they're applying it to human beings. Reward them. Make them do exactly what you want them to do without the whip, but with some form of sugar-coated drug or candy, which will make them think that they're actually enjoying every moment of it. This is the most dangerous of all systems of compulsion. That's why I regard Skinner's Walden 2 as another name for hell. And it would be a worse hell because we wouldn't realize we were there. We would imagine we were still in heaven. Most of the reactions that have taken place in art, including those that come under the head of the beatniks and the hippies, have some underlying sense in the reaction itself. But the remedy is part of the disease. The remedy, in fact, makes it easier for the institutions that now have their hold upon us to be even more compulsive and even more effective than ever before. If we don't care, if we drop out, if we lose ourselves in insane fantasy of some kind, whether a natural fantasy of the neurotic or the chemically induced fantasy of someone who takes drugs, we lose our possibility of restoring our own autonomy, of taking charge of our life, because this requires greater energy, greater effort than that which is required to live through the daily life of a machine worker. We have to become fully activated human beings, every part of us, tremendously alive and ready to take charge. And this can't be done by people who are in escape, people who are who form the habit of total rejection. We must know what we want, not just what we don't want.
Does everybody have one of these documents that was handed out? They're on the table here. Anybody that wants to take one. In the top of the document, we talk about polytechnics, which was actually a term first proposed by Lewis Mumford. There is actually a section called What is Polytechnics on number 4. And if you go to page 9, it talks about the difference between monotechnics and polytechnics. Every time we construct a piece of technology, there is some negative effect on humanity, whether it's the factory system that destroy some part of the human soul of the human being who does some form of mechanical work in that factory all day long as a machine, as a component in a gigantic system managed by rational techniques, whether it's the ecological destruction, whether it's the psychological targeting done by companies in order to attract more of your time and attention into social media. There are very real negative effects about technology that we need to grasp with on a conscious level. But there are also benefits to technology, and those benefits are very much dependent on our worldview, our vision of the society that we want to construct. And in particular, we need to start conceptualizing on a conscious level, how do we apply technology? And Lewis Mumford talked about polytechnics, which is the use of techniques or technology, not just for technology's own sake, but as part of a multidisciplinary, unified approach, incorporating many different fields of knowledge to try and situate a piece of technology in this world, to try and understand its effect on humanity, on society in its totality. And at the same time in the 60s, computers were just making their way from military into industry. And these were gigantic, huge machines occupying entire rooms. If you wanted to be able to use them, you had to get an appointment, you had to get some time on the machine to be able to use it for some time. And they grew up a community of idealistic people around these computers who really saw them as a form of power with a huge amount of potential, that if only they could get access to these tools of power, they could use it to improve humanity. And so they started to get jobs near the computers as janitors, even as maintainers, as cleaners. And in the spare moments when people weren't using, when those machines weren't being used, they would jump onto them. They would try to learn how they work. They would get familiar with them. And bit by bit, they began to even build their own software, and they began to share it in this community of people together. And they were the early hackers. And then, as they became more familiar with this technology, they started to build their own computers in their garages, in their homes, in their backyards. And that was the birth of the personal computer. And that was a really important development. And it was driven by an idealistic group of technologists who really believed in the transformative power of technology. As the personal computer started to develop, this community, which before was very marginalized, a lot of capital started to flow into the community. A lot of businesses saw a big opportunity for investment, and the entire field started to explode. And that was something that was very important, because it took the idea of the personal computer and developed it into a product which today we have in our hands as computers, as laptops, as mobile phones. But in the process of that happening, something very important was being lost, which was the values of the community. Before, people used to be very idealistic. They used to share the software and the code between each other. In the process of the companies taking over, they started to turn everything proprietary. People stopped to share the knowledge and the technology and the code with each other. And there came along a man, Richard Stallman. Oh, that's the early computers. And what Stallman did is he said that it doesn't have to be this way. This is wrong. In fact, we can do something about this. We can build our own free software operating system owned by us. And a lot of people at the time thought that Richard Stallman was crazy. To build your own operating system, it's a huge task. But Richard Stallman was a very stubborn guy. He knew what was the truth. He had his own ideas about technology and freedom. And he went for 10 years and he worked on his own operating system. And that was the birth of Linux. And there's an early video of young Richard Stallman.
Richard Stallman has been called the last pure hacker for choosing to remain at MIT despite the temptations of the commercial world, true to the spirit of the early hackers.
What they had in common was mainly love of excellence in programming. They wanted to make their programs that they used be as good as they could. They also wanted to make them do neat things. They wanted to be able to do something in a more exciting way than anyone believed possible and show, look how wonderful this is. I bet you can believe this could be done.
So that was in the early 90s when Linux free software started to develop. Linux was born in 1991. And the problem was that Richard Stallman was a little bit of a hippie. He was very idealistic. And he had the opportunity to turn this movement into something bigger, to institutionalize it. And he didn't. And what happened was another group of guys came along. They saw an opportunity in free software. And what they started to do is they started to say that this technology, it's not about the values, it's not about the freedom or the reason why we do it. It's simply that this software is cheaper, it's more efficient, it's better for business. And that was the open source movement. So they took the free software movement and they removed the values and they turned it into a business commodity. And the result of that is open source did develop, it did acquire a lot of capital. However, its relevance as a political force today is also fading out. At the same time in the 90s, in England, was the time of the Blair government, Tony Blair. And when Tony Blair came into power, he had a radically different vision of society, which was as opposed to all of the old ideas of a politician as a person who came into power, guided by a vision of a society that they wanted to create, and using the tools of political power to try and construct that society. Instead, they took on a new view of a human being, which was born out of the Cold War, which is a deeply rational view of the human being that was created to make the computer models of the Cold War, to make the behavior of human beings fit the computer models. And what happened is that overly simplified human being started to become seen as the actual way that human beings are, as people that are purely self-interested in the now, in this moment, paranoid and completely selfish. And their idea was to construct a new system of government based off of targets, based off of rational calculations, in which every individual is like an entrepreneur in the marketplace, that free in any creative way that they want to try and satisfy the target, and that this entire system could be managed using numbers and statistics and metrics. And so what happened is that gradually there were behaviors in this system of management that this rational system wasn't able to account for. So for instance, in the hospitals in England, because there was a metric for the number of beds, people started to take the wheels off of the beds, off of the trolleys, and classify them as beds. Or the police started to reclassify a lot of crime as suspicious occurrences to lower their crime rates. And so what the government started to do was to start to create more targets, more metrics, to be able to cover all of these cases that their system wasn't able to account for. And what actually happened is that it led to a really huge amount of bureaucratization in England, a huge bureaucracy. And this original system, which was supposed to leave the individual free to use whatever creativity or methods that they have to try and reach their target or objective, actually became a new rigid form of control, of conformity, of management. It became something that was overly restrictive on human beings. And what's really interesting about this is that the internet today is a gigantic culture machine for generating identities, ways of life, different fashions. But all of this is incredibly conformist, that now anybody on the internet expressing an opinion that doesn't fit social conventions can be not just attacked by their local community, but attacked by their entire world. And actually what this is masking is a form of mass ideological conformity in the society. It's a very sinister form of behavioural management of society that is slowly taking over our civil societies. And all of the technological utopians and the hackers and all of the idealists have chosen to withdraw from all of this into their own carefully constructed dream worlds, into their own bubbles. And what this means is we're allowing these problems to persist rather than trying to grasp with the effects of some part of that history that the hackers played a role in, and to try and apply our knowledge to remedy the course that society is on. Every time I walk into a hacker space or go to a technology conference, many of the projects that we're working on is incredibly self-indulgent. We're amusing ourselves making toys, and it's really instructive to understand what happened in ancient Greece in the time of the Alexandrian Library, which was the biggest library that the world had ever known. People used to come from all over the world to read books there. It was all of the wealth of humanity's knowledge from all over the world, from ancient Greek philosophers, medicine, science, and so on. And the Christian mob in the city, one day they came to the Alexandrian Library, and the head of the Alexandrian Library is a woman called Hypatia. And she was an astronomer, a mathematician, a philosopher. In that time, in ancient Greece, with the status of women, there was a woman in charge of the world's greatest store of knowledge. And the mob came and they took Alexandria, they took Hypatia, and they tortured her, they killed her, and they burnt down the entire library, the Christian mob. And always when people tell that story, they tell it as a story of a Philistine ignorant mob who came and destroyed all the wealth of science and technology and humanity. But there is also another side to that story, because the knowledge that they had at that time was very advanced. They had steam power, they had high mathematics, they had astronomy, but they never used that knowledge. While the common man was working in the fields doing backbreaking labour, they were making toys to amuse the king. So in 2010 is when I discovered Bitcoin, and at the time it was a very simplistic website. It said that Bitcoin is a form of peer-to-peer money that cannot be controlled by banks or central governments. And at the time, I didn't think that was realistic. I thought, this can't be possible. But as I took the time to understand the source code, to understand how is this thing actually working, I realized that there is something really important in this piece of technology. And so everything else that I was doing, I stopped and started to work on Bitcoin. And in those early days, all of the people in that community, they were there. They didn't think Bitcoin would be worth anything for many, many, many years. But we believed that Bitcoin had some potential or power, and that was why we put our energy into developing Bitcoin. A lot of them were people that came out of the libertarian community, out of the free software community, a lot of very idealistic people, putting their minds together, devoting hours and hours of time to develop Bitcoin. And as Bitcoin started to grow up and started to gain some fame, there became a clique of guys led by Gavin Andresen and Mike Hearn and other people. And these people tried to maintain their position as the heads of this project, not through any personal merit, through any innate essence, but through power, through coercion, through manipulation, through public relations management, through cutting people off out of the community, through slander. And there were some of us who saw that this was wrong, that these people wanted to remove the values from Bitcoin, wanted to turn Bitcoin into another commodity, as happened with the early computers, with the free software movement. They wanted to turn Bitcoin into a tool of corporate power, of the state, and because the whole idea of Bitcoin as a revolutionary tool against the power of central banks and governments, as a form of P2P money that is uncensored and anonymous, is something that they said was scary for business. And what we did is to draw a line in the sand and to make visible that there are two sides to Bitcoin. And that work, which I was very instrumental in starting after I went to Syria, other people continued that fight, and that side of Bitcoin managed to win. And that was something that was very important. I'm very grateful for. And that was the people that came on top, like Peter Todd and so on, people that really believe in the principles or values of Bitcoin. But in the same way that when the Soviet Union existed for America, it gave America something to fight against, Bitcoin no longer had anything, had a struggle inside of it. And what's happened is that the community has become a little bit stagnant. And there isn't really a strong vision behind Bitcoin. And even other projects, like for instance Ethereum now, are taking a lot of developers out of Bitcoin. So if we want to think about cryptocurrency on a national level, because in the West, economics is one of the main pillars of organizing our society, then there are 2 points that we need to think about with cryptocurrency. The first is that we need to do an analysis of social movements, not just developing tools blindly, but actually examining what is happening in our world around us, what is the underlying issues or problems in our societies, to think, okay, what tools do we have at our disposal that we can apply towards a shared goal that we have, that we can move as a body of people with a sense of directionality. And the other side of that as well is that we need to move away from this local, individual, limited scope of developing apps in a marketplace to thinking about how can we construct larger systems that scale on a much bigger level, that can provide infrastructure. Because cryptocurrency is not ready to serve as an economic force right now. It's a interesting sideshow or project. But if we're going to think about going to the next level, it's going to take a large-scale coordinated effort between a huge group of people going towards a goal with a proper analysis. So our interest, so in Catalonia, there is a national sentiment which we could look at as a viable market, as a body of people sharing core values, and that we can use cryptocurrency and technologies to construct alternative structures outside of the state that allow people to satisfy their own needs as an autonomous body of people. For instance, one of the main arguments that people here put to the Spanish state why they want to become independent from the Spanish state is the level of taxes that they have to pay. We can give an answer to that demand using cryptocurrency. And there are also other key regions that we also have an interest in. One of the main areas is the project of Rojava in North Syria, where they are constructing an economy based off of a system of cooperatives as an alternative to a state-based system, or which is enforced by a state-based system that manage market. Another, Kerala in India is a state in southern India, and they have a very big free software, free technology program, especially in developing medical technology. Latin America is an area of the world right now that have a lot of potential for development of alternative movements in Argentina, in Mexico. The problem is that this global system, we can understand it not just as on a national basis, but on a global level as a network. And Latin America is very much one of the periphery continents in the world. The reason why Marxism is so popular in Latin America is the level of financial and economic exploitation that the people there face. And we can use modern technologies as a form of empowerment to give Latin Americans a way forwards out of their crisis. And another really important region is Africa. And also recently, I was handed a report or a proposal for a project in Russia where they want to create a decentralized marketplace that isn't subject to American censorship, like Alibaba, that they can have their entire production chain within their local region of states, not just Russia, but also the Caucasian states together, is as a political tool. And these tools that we develop is not just in isolation, but together with the support, together we seek the support of different social movements. For instance, here it would be the independentist movement or the Barcelona City Council, to try and coordinate our work together. And what this means is we need a network of resistance, that we develop a common technological basis organized around common principles, that we share common principles. We develop links with other technological organizations to coordinate our work together. So about our projects. So in the document, it describes about each individual project. So for instance, on the front it talks about telecommunications in terms of the community network. In page 3, it says about our short-term objectives, which in this stage is to set up community networks based off of the Guifi.net model, which the model of Guifi.net and Freifunk is something that could be exported to other regions around the world to develop autonomous telecommunications infrastructure. But on page 4, at the top of the page, it says establish mobile telephone ISP with 4G internet. So today, computer or technology devices are moving from computers and laptops to the mobile phone, and currently there is no free technology answer for telecommunications on the mobile phone, telecommunications infrastructure. So it's an absolute imperative for free technology movement to develop a solution for that. However, in the short term, we can start with basic internet infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure. The second project is about free software. So on page 4 it talks about make Linux a dominant operating system. What this means is part of what made Linux spread was not just that we were developing Linux, that we were uploading it on the internet, but there was a community of people doing support. Every town and city had a Linux user group. There were places where you could go, you could learn about Linux. There's a very active community of people advocating free technology, spreading it to other people. And so we have to understand that our work is not just a technological work, but it's also a social work at the same time. The same time, we need to be spreading the knowledge of technology, of Linux, of the desktop, so that it becomes rooted in our communities around us, not just that we understand, that we know about it. And part of that is also about developing school curriculums, school textbooks, and so on. Also, industrial development. So the first stage is a research project about free hardware, ecological industrial, and the long-term objective is ecological industrial technology. In Rojava, they have now a developing industrial program, which is based off of the principle concept of developing an industrial system that is harmonious with the environment, with the human beings around it, with ecological development, because it's recognized that ecological development is something that is innate to human freedom, to humanity having a satisfying existence. And in particular, our work, inside of that work, is to think, how do we apply our knowledge of technology to support that industrial program? And based off of a process of feedback, of work, observation, analysis, and modification to our work, we can develop new concepts or new ideas about developing industrial technology. And one of the first pioneers of this was the project of open source ecology, which was driven by two key concepts, which was the concept of having all of the equipment based off of a modular design, and each of those components, the second point being that each of those components could be, is based off of open source plans that anybody can develop. And so now that project has kind of stagnated, so now we have the opportunity at our organization to take that idea and concept forwards and apply it in a large region. Lastly, and this is our longer term objective, is about how we can replace bureaucracy with digital software. How we can use the technology, the cryptography, the peer-to-peer technology to construct new forms of economic organization between human beings. How we can use smart contracts to construct a new form of legal system based off of polymorphic law, form of law which is consensus-based, which is not monopolistic, to try and understand where did the movement with the pirates, with the idea of digital democracy, where did it go wrong? The maybe it's not just about constructing the one perfect platform to apply across every single use case, but maybe there is a lot of differences in a case-by-case basis that actually is more about giving people the tools that they can use to construct their own platforms to satisfy their own needs on local levels according to the needs of each movement of each region. So in terms of cryptocurrency, what is our main critique right now? There is a big separation between theory and practice. Everybody is trying to develop the next new cool big technology. Everybody is releasing papers. People in universities theorizing about new advanced cryptography techniques. However, this technology, very small amount of this technology is making its way into the hands of users, the hands of people. On the flip side of that, the wallets, the user-facing technology, a lot of it is very simplistic, is lacking very basic features. So our job, our role, is to connect both of these sides of the technology movement together to be able to create harmonious state within the cycle of technological development. And in terms of cryptocurrency, we talked about using cryptocurrency to create economic sovereignty for supporting national movements around the world. Movements, and when we talk about national movements, not about people having their own state, but about people, about marginalized peoples being able to protect their integrity as a culture from liberal globalism. And when we talk about applying cryptocurrency on a large-scale level, what we need to think about is a unified financial infrastructure. And so far, our analysis, which is also in the section about cryptocurrency on page 16, is first, one of the most important bases for developing these new series of technologies like the decentralized web, decentralized markets. One of the key puzzle pieces that is missing is a proper messaging subsystem that can be used to construct all of these new technological concepts. But it's not just something that has application for cryptocurrency, but has wide application for digital governance and all of the other abstract systems that we were talking about earlier. Also, we need to give focus to anonymity in wallets, strong anonymity to protect users. The project of Monero is very interesting. There still isn't a proper decentralized exchange, like a decentralized marketplace with anonymity working over Tor that allow people to economically organize in an autonomous way. So that was about, okay, so the exchange at the top. So decentralized exchanges are very important. And something that, so the wallets and the exchanges are something that go together. And then also we need to think about a payment system on a large scale level, whether that's paper currency, whether that's mobile phone application, whether it's cheap $4 devices which can transact Bitcoin with a merchant working over LoRa radio networks that can cover 20 square kilometers, or whether we establish WiMAX systems. We have to try and think about when we apply Bitcoin, how could we apply this technology on a local level that it can serve all of the needs of the population? Because to talk about replacing current currency with cryptocurrency, but not satisfying the needs of everybody in the local community, is not really a replacement or a solution. So, so through these projects, through our analysis, our goal is to reinvigorate the free technology movement. This movement used to be a movement that had a huge amount of political power in the 70s, in the 80s, even in the 90s. They did change politics, they did change the society, but this movement has lost its way. And our goal now is to reformulate the ideas, like Richard Stallman did in the early 90s, that give an energy to the community to start moving in a direction towards a goal. So, our first objective is to establish headquarters here in Catalonia, and to start to gather together our team of hackers that we train, that we send to manage our network of projects, and develop an organization that takes on projects to manage, and also accumulate capital that we use to invest in projects, in groups, developing projects, and through our work demonstrate our capability and provide a space for projects that we shepherd, kind of like a startup accelerator, but a politicized one, which is not driven by profit but driven by social change, and through this advance the technology movement forwards. So to do that, we first we gather our members. So about our needs now. So we need to find lawyers, we need to find local organizations that can give us support, that can give us protection. For instance, for things like issuing visas, many different things. There's a lot of different complexities that we're not equipped to deal with. The second thing is now we are searching for a place, and if there are other organizations that want to join with us to that we can divide the cost of the rent for a place, we can establish a cryptocurrency center, Cryptocurrency and Free Technology Institute in Barcelona. So for instance, there's this place, there's one place that we're looking at, we looked at it today, but there's probably other far more better places that locals here can find, because we're foreigners. For 2,000 euros a month, we have another organization also wants to split the cost with us. If there's 3 people involved, then we can all pay 600 euros each a month, which is a really small amount. For instance, this place, it's a big place, 500 square meters. Also, we made a nice So for instance, have some rooms, like an academy. Okay, the 3D is so good.
Are you planning to build that, or?
To build it? No, if we find a place. I'll just go with the PDF. It's better. So for instance, if there's one big room that we can do events in, we can do training, we can do classes, a kitchen, toilets and showers, some kind of offices, some rooms for people to sleep in. For us, that's perfect space. But we're looking at different options. So anyway, back to the other thing. So also, if we get support from established institutions, that will enable us to gain more support. And what we can do is we can establish a coordinating committee about the space or about the projects. About the projects, the committee is not it's not enforced, it's consensual, but it's a way of coordinating the activity between the groups. There's some form of coherency. And also we can talk about taking people from the different organizations into our organization every so often to give them periodic training. For instance, like on a weekend, we give them training over 2 days. So, what are the benefits? So the first is we can make Barcelona into a global center for technological development, for cryptocurrency, an important place in Europe. We can use the technological capability to build up the strength of the Catalan autonomist movement and gain a socio-political victory. Through our work, we can bring increased investment and support for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency projects to Catalonia. For instance, I can bring a lot of people in different projects here. People like Cody Wilson, Vitalik Buterin, Peter Todd, people from other autonomous movements like Rojava, Latin America, Kerala, people from WikiLeaks, a lot of media attention that we can use to support developing a local ecosystem here. And also we will establish a Bitcoin conference. We'll make an event here. So also we can establish links between this region and other regions to build up a network, not just between technology projects, but between other socio-political movements and projects. And finally we can really pioneer a historical precedent for the use of technology and its relevance. We can spread cryptocurrency and Bitcoin within Barcelona itself. So I know there's a lot of rich entrepreneurs here, maybe not so rich as London, but let's put our energy, our efforts together to establish something, to make a cryptocurrency and technology institute here in Barcelona. The price we just had the Bitcoin price crash. Why did it crash? Because there's no real value or use for Bitcoin. Everybody that's buying Bitcoin is buying it because next week they hope the price will go up. The drive upwards in price is hollow. There's no value or real use behind that. If we don't do something to remedy that, then cryptocurrency will just be a paper tiger. It will be irrelevant. It will have no relevance to people's life. And through our work, we can make world first major landmark in technology. We can train people. We can send them to work on projects. I have a lot of people now that want to join me. I get a lot of emails, but we're just in the phase now of creating the organisation, finding the space. Afterwards, we will make a lot of propaganda as well. And also, something that I feel is really important is the next generation of young hackers, people who may be facing a life of corporate work, going to university, to take those idealistic young people, to give them the opportunity to be able to develop their vision and their capability, and to put them into something that's really useful and really fulfilling as a work. So I want to finish with the story of Ada Lovelace. The computer was first developed in the 50s during World War II to crack German war codes and to calculate the trajectories for armaments. But the computer itself was actually proposed in the early 1800s by Charles Babbage. At the time, Charles Babbage, he proposed the computer as a mechanical calculating device to make industry more efficient, to solve mathematical sums. And there was a woman called Ada Lovelace. Her father was Lord Byron Lovelace, the poet. He had gone to fight in the Greek War of Independence against the Ottomans, and he had died. And her mother was furious, and she forbid her daughter from studying poetry, and instead pushed her into studying mathematics and science. And Ada was a visionary. They called her the Countess of Numbers. She was really interested in not just mathematics in its own right, but in metaphysical questions, in social questions. And she really, when she saw Babbage's computer, she became obsessed with it. She really grasped something about it. And at the time, nobody else saw the potential of Babbage's computer. Only Ada Lovelace saw it. And she wrote scientific papers in which she said that the value or the potential of this computer was not just as a mechanical calculating device to improve the efficiency of industry, but it has enormous social benefit, enormous social uses, and that this computer should be in the homes of every single person. She said that it could be used to construct beautiful works of art, musical compositions, and she was also the world's first programmer. She developed the world's first computer program. But her vision was ignored by a lot of people. They thought that she was a bit crazy. They didn't really understand what she was saying. And the computer didn't get developed. And it would take 150 years later, in the 70s, in the 80s, for Ada Lovelace's vision to actually materialise. But it is something that could have happened in the Victorian ages if people had had a bit more vision. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was waiting for the question.
¿Qué pasa, Alex? No funciona esto.
Yeah, hello. We have this one. You can use this one.
Hola.
Yes, as the first question, when you're planning to have Barcelona as a cryptocurrency technology institute, world first major landmark technology, and etc., what you said, are you planning to move and live here, or are you actually living here already?
Yeah, but I'm going to be here minimum 2 years, maybe longer.
Okay.
So following up on this question, will you be trying to plant seeds over the world in different regions, setting up these centers, or did you choose Catalonia because of the political situation? What are the motives that bring you here?
So, for instance, I've had a few people contacting me based off of a similar talk I did in Paris, saying that they have a similar idea to what I'm talking about, and they want to offer their spaces and support. For instance, there's a Star Accelerator in Argentina, and I said that we had interest in Latin America. But first I need to train a core group of people, a core group of guys that I can trust, that I can send to other places to manage other projects. So for instance, once I have a group here established, running, I can go to Argentina for a few months with one of my guys. I can make sure everything's set up and is okay, and put them there to work, to train their own groups of people. But Europe is a very important place for my work with technology. I can't go to America because I have a problem with my legal situation. So to be established in Europe, I originally had looked at Greece, but then I decided Greece is doesn't have as much political potential as Catalonia. So now I've chosen to come to Catalonia because it's also a place where I think this work that we have can have very big political significance.
I want to ask you a question actually about a problem that I am trying to understand. So I was thinking I actually proposed a project to my university, which I'm now admitted to, about putting rural economies on blockchain. And the problem that I was facing, apart from training the people involved in the community, was that even if you do put a rural economy on blockchain, in intra-community, it's fine, and as long as you do that exchange. But as far as services are concerned, but when you involve goods, and from the external to internal, that conversion, with this fiat currency and this blockchain system, how do you solve that problem? I mean, can we evade or escape or somehow mitigate this problem of fiat currency and its unreliable nature?
Okay, so agricultural markets is not something I'm especially expert in. So I know a lot of guys who have developed these web platforms for managing agricultural products and cooperatives. However, based off of the conversations I've had with people actually working in this sector, they've told me that a lot of these web platforms are actually more of a hindrance than a help. So what we have to do is we have to try and get away from the mindset that technology is the solution. The solution is a social solution, but the technology can be used to support those efforts. And what you said is very true about intra-community rather than actually on an individual level. And that's the main role that I see for these economic tools, is because as an individual, if we exist in a global marketplace, we don't exist. We're extinguished. So it's very important that we think how to construct larger economic unions between people and how we use the tools to be able to protect ourselves inside. And there is a lot of financial tools that mainly right now are used for classic financial market that we can appropriate, we can deconstruct, we can study to try and think about how we apply them in service of our values, our goals. And for instance, there's the concept of CSA about buying baskets of goods, which is something that give investment into a farmer at the beginning of his cycle of production. And what we can start to think about is how to take that model and improve it with technology. For instance, we can use prediction markets to enable people to bet on the price of goods so that the farmers can get the investment before the goods have actually been bought. We can, because when people in that scheme, when they invest, they get a basket of unquantified goods. We can actually start to think about using networks to do swaps between different baskets of goods so that people can just get the products that they want. As in, we can make a more efficient system and more better satisfy the needs of the human beings inside of that through the technology without losing focus about why are we doing this. We're doing this not because we want people to be able to live better than the other system in a material sense. We're doing it because we have some other perspective about what is the purpose or the meaning of life and existence.
Hello. Hi. I'm here. We met a few years ago in London, so first of all I wanted to congratulate you for your ambition, because even though we didn't have the best, let's say, we didn't get along in that meeting so well at the time, I think that it's very valuable what you're doing regarding trying to take action on your ideas. Now, having said that, my question is, I'm not sure if you realize, if you're aware of the latest news here in Barcelona, but according to your manifesto, from what I can see, you are aiming for an expression and a development of higher democratic values for all human beings. But the political situation in Barcelona, from what I understand, is that the region is very split politically. There's 50% of people that support one side and 50% approximately. It doesn't really matter, but it's pretty much even. Do you realize and are you okay with kind of alienating or antagonizing half of the potential allies that you could have in this region by taking sides with one of those sides?
So, yeah, thank you for the compliment. And I've developed a lot of my thinking since then. About your question, in the beginning, I tried to emphasize that we're not about making a state, about a border or a region. We're about developing the civil society, national movements in civil society. About your question about Catalonia, what is very important to realize is I personally believe that a lot of the rhetoric coming out of the Catalan independentist movement is a mask for the actual real underlying causes that people aren't able to adequately articulate. That it's not just a process of something that is happening in Catalonia, but it's something that's happening with all of Southern Europe. Southern Europe is very different to England, to London. You know, people here are not meant to work like slaves all day, every day. They're meant to eat goat's cheese and olives and have a chit-chat and a siesta. If you go to like 15 minutes from here, or even less than that, 10 minutes, there's a gigantic building that looks like a dildo. Yeah, dildo. And when you look at it, it's the same building as in London, and it's not a Spanish building, it's not a Catalan building. It looks like an alien spaceship. All around it, all of these gigantic shopping malls with, and you can go to Buenos Aires, to Moscow, to London, go anywhere in the world, and you see the same people, the same fashion, the same dress. This is not humanity. This is a degradation of humanity. So that's what's happening in Catalonia, is that they're losing their culture, and the reaction against that is to call for is to reassert their identity in a flag. And I feel that a lot of that is just almost like a football team, just with a flag. There's no wider consciousness behind that. And our goal is not just to separate people off, but it's to actually regenerate the culture and the society. And in the same time, when you go to Madrid and you see all the Spanish flags all up everywhere, why is there such a strong nationalist Spanish fascist, like neo-fascist movement in Spain? What is that a reaction to? I would say it's the same reason behind the Catalans as well. And there's some parts of Madrid that you can walk around, and literally it's entire neighborhoods just filled with immigrants, with drug dealers on the street. And it's not something against immigrants, but it's about the modernity, about the globalism, that there is no core of values holding the society together. And that's the reason why these things exist. And so when we talk about using the technology for sovereignty, it's about bringing back those sense of values, that sense of shared belief that hold the society together. The Catalan people have their own culture. Spain needs to respect that. At the same time, if Catalans want to be able to defend themselves against this northern cultural imperialism, they can't do it by themselves. They're going to have to unify, be united with the Iberian Peninsula. I mean, they share a lot in terms of culture, language, and also with Southern Europe. But that's a work for the people here to do. They need to do an examination, a study, to make a proposal for constructing a new democratic civilization here that incorporate all of the national identities inside the Iberia, while being respectful of the autonomy, of the identity of each component that make up the richness of this entire region. That just to have Spain be Spain everywhere, it would mean that it loses character. Barcelona have a distinct character, Sevilla, Madrid. And what is really interesting is the geography of this region. Carthage was a merchant-based empire. They were the first city in the world to develop tower blocks, because everybody wanted to move to Carthage to get rich, whereas Rome was very much based around the religion, around the land, around the standing armies. And Catalonia had many different peoples pass through it. Had Carthage pass through it. It's always been a kind of mountainous, hilly region, like Basque Country, which mountainous regions are very difficult to colonize. It's been next to the sea as well. It's been very multicultural. Whereas Madrid is in the center. It's in a flat land. The logic of flat land is you're in it, you can see the horizon. You can see all the areas around you to manage. So the job is not just to draw a border and go, that's it, we're free now. Because even if Catalonia became independent, I don't believe it can become independent because it's not going to be accepted by France, by Germany, by all these countries in Europe that have their own problems with secessionist movements. Even if it became an independent state in a system of global states, it would just be another weak state inside the same matrix of liberal power relations. It's not going to make the people here more free. But maybe have the opposite effect. Maybe make the society more militarized. Maybe actually economically isolate people. There's a big job for real Catalan revolutionary movement, real Iberian revolutionary movement, to do a proper analysis, to think about how do we synthesize these ideas together to construct a movement that answer all of the reasons for discontent in all sectors of this society. Because Europe now is facing a huge crisis. Now in Germany, it's the first time since World War II that a far-right party became elected to parliament. Unless there's real effort to construct alternative to this system of nothingness emanating out of New York and London, then we're going to lose the discourse, and what's going to rise up is going to be something very ugly, very authoritarian, terrorist movements.
Okay, last question.
On the page number 3 on the organization roadmap, the objective number 3, the free hardware, I think I didn't get the live track, or I think there is no free lunch, so money should come from somewhere, at least at the beginning, from the hardware. Could you give me an example or an idea of free hardware? Or is the software is bad here? I don't really get it.
Oh, it's research for free hardware, it is.
Right.
So, sorry, could you repeat your answer, your question? It's like
free hardware.
what it means?
Yes.
It is. Oh, this is the first step. This is the first part of the roadmap, and we'll start with the research about free hardware's technology that we can have or develop to have to the next steps. So use like systems like, for example, Arduino boards or something like this, circuits, processors. So it's a research about all these things and what we can do free with technology that we have. No, it's one example, it's open source.
Okay, thank you very much, Amir, for coming, and we have no more time. We can continue at the bar near here, and some beers, and talking. Thank you very much.